and when he reached the last of the small dark juniper trees where the broad valley ran under the Animus Peaks, he crouched quietly to steady his breath, and then raised himself slowly and looked out. They were running on the plain, harrying the antelope, and the antelope moved like phantoms in the snow, and circled and wheeled, and the dry powder blew about them in the cold moonlight, and their breath smoked palely in the cold as if they burned with some inner fire, and the wolves twisted and turned and leapt in a silence such that they seemed of another world entire. They moved down the valley and turned and moved far out on the plain until they were the smallest of figures in that dim whiteness, and then they disappeared. He was very cold. He waited. It was very still. He could see by his breath how the wind lay, and he watched his breath appear and vanish and appear and vanish constantly before him in the cold, and he waited a long time. Then he saw them coming, loping and twisting, dancing, tunneling their noses in the snow, loping and running and rising by twos in a standing dance, and running on again. There were 7 of them, and they passed within 20 feet of where he lay. He could see their almond eyes in the moonlight. He could hear their breath. He could feel the presence of their knowing that was electric in the air. They bunched and nuzzled and licked one another. Then they stopped. They stood with their ears cocked, some with one forefoot raised to their chest. They were looking at him. He did not breathe. They did not breathe. They stood. Then they turned and quietly trotted on. When he got back to the house, Boyd was awake, but he didn't tell him where he'd been or what he'd seen. He never told anybody.
Good morning.
I don't know. Maybe it's just the Gandalf look is growing on you or something.
Let me ask you something, JB. When they used the swab, what did they use?
A small Q-tip.
Yep, they're not supposed to. That test is not. That's not a valid test.
That's what I thought. I thought it wasn't valid too.
Not. It's ridiculous. It was a waste of your time and everybody else's.
Are you sure?
Yeah, because the end of the Q-tip does not bring the residual DNA that's needed. It falls off the Q-tip. It's not the right material. The longer Q-tips are made of something different.
They called it tickle your brain or something.
And grips the DNA.
Well,
Rhonda Lehman's complaining about it right now, that the tests are bullshit. And, they are, kind of.
Well, I kind of thought it was right when I was doing it because you do it to yourself.
Yeah.
And, some people are going to go halfway in and other people are going to try to go further. But they did say to leave it in there and twist it around, and I got it up there pretty darn far. And then they tell you to put it in the other nostril, the same side, and do it again. So, it could be legit. I don't know. I
don't know either.
Yeah. So who organized the testing? Who's actually doing it?
It's the state of West Virginia.
State of West Virginia. Okay.
Yeah, the National Guard and the NAACP helped out, and there was a lot of people that were involved in it.
2 things. Did you see the National Guard? They gave them up to a certain date, to the 24th, and then if they kept working past that day, they all those benefits would have to carry over and go on towards their retirement. They cut them off.
Yeah, right.
They said all the National Guard will be recalled after this date.
Hey, I see James is coming in. He's coming in from New Jersey. He has relocated to New Jersey. So
Wow. James. All right, James.
James is on mute right now.
Well, I didn't mute him. I don't think.
Did I? Select his audio.
Oh, that's his thing. He's probably
He's got it. He'll do it.
Yeah. Right.
And then also too, I don't know if you saw this, but the $500 billion that was supposed to go to businesses and such. Okay, here we're at. They've spent $30 million. Okay, one of the payments went I think it was $9.7 million went to a drilling company that filed for bankruptcy, and all of their top brass each got $1 million bonus.
That should be exposed.
That's a pretty good scam.
Yeah.
Are they all out of the country
really
now?
That's
Or?
one of Trump's buddies, too.
Yeah.
You know that. Somebody called him up and said, hey, man, help me out.
Whether
So much winning.
right.
So much
He's
winning.
really bad now.
Well, maybe they headed to Jersey. I don't know.
I'm taking it. I just drank bleach. I'm good.
Yeah.
I know. Okay, so I don't. Where are we at now in time? Are we at 9? No, we got 2 minutes for Larry to come in.
Maybe he has a kitty
So
cat.
well, this morning, guys, when Larry, as soon as Larry gets on, or if he's late, we'll just start without him. Mike, we'll have a little more official open up so we identify everybody. I don't know what I think. John Unger knows everybody here, but
Yeah.
JB's got a kitten.
You know, that's cute. That is cute. There you go. Right. You
He's
know,
what do they call Velcro? He's a Velcro kitty.
he just hangs on your back, huh?
Yeah.
That looks like a little.
Cute.
Did you just get that one? That look.
Yeah, I just got it the other day.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it looks like a little baby.
Hey, there's more if you want one, Mike.
Guess what?
No, that's okay. I have 2 that I can't stand, so I'm good.
There's John. Okay, there's John. He's looking in.
Now we might as well go ahead and say good morning and then introduce the show, Mr. Case.
Okay, let me. I'll say first. Let's see if John can hear us. Hi, John.
I can hear you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
John.
Hello.
All right. I think John knows everybody here, but we got Mike Diesel, our former stand-up comedian that is quarantined now. It's hard to get an audience except on Zoom here. So, and James Boyd, who I'm sure you part of the recovery program in Martinsburg, and although he's here from New Jersey this morning. And J.B. Christensen, who I think is one of your parishioners. I don't know whether he goes every Sunday or not. I haven't followed that. I'm not keeping.
Well, more importantly, he's my very dear friend.
Okay.
You know.
And myself. And we expect Larry Bish to come in here whenever he gets it together. He works, of course, at the or has worked at the correctional center there in Martinsburg as a counselor for many years, and is a good friend of our program as well, and he provides an unusual insight into all these matters. Who's got their? Oh, here comes Larry. Yeah.
All right.
Let him get in. All right. I think we got. I think we have the crew here. Now you can. The great thing about Zoom. Before I hand it to Mike, the great thing about Zoom is if everybody is good and mutes themselves when they're not talking, it'll help the background noises. But also on the regular radio, you could never have 5 people call in because no one could ever tell what the difference between the voices. Okay, I'd have people ask me who the heck said that, that, and but here we can do it differently. So we are broadcasting. Live on both the radio station here, www.enlightenradio.org, as well as YouTube. Mike, can you give us an official opening?
Welcome to Enlighten Radio's The End of the Road with your original dusty-footed philosopher and host, Mr. John Case, his sometimes sidekick and very funny and wise, Larry Bish. Also joining us today will be J.B. Christensen, James Boyd, and the esteemed Reverend Senator Genius, friend, good dude, John Unger is here, everybody, and me, big mouth announcer guy.
John's gonna have to climb down from that mountain somehow. I don't know how he's gonna do that, but anyway. So the theme this morning is recovery, and I have a short introduction. It really relates to encouraging everybody to read, listen. And I have it posted on both our website and also on the Facebook economics thing. Larry Summers interview with Rick Levin, who I think is the president of Yale University, as part of the Jackson Yale Institute. I forget what exactly all the different economic topics that they're researching, but they're pretty big. And Joe Stiglitz, also a Nobel Prize winner, interviewed, I think, yesterday on Bloomberg at length.
He was also on Lawrence O'Donnell.
Oh, okay, but he had almost a half-hour session on just mostly him on, maybe it's the same, I'm sure, similar message. And both of these guys have said a lot of the things that I think most of us probably are aware of, but added, I thought, a fairly profound observation, speculation in part, and that is that the economy coming out of the pandemic is not going to be the same one that entered it. And the structural changes contemplated or even half known at this point are big enough that it's unlikely that there is a purely market solution that will work at all. And whatever happens is going to require a tremendous amount of federal assistance and smart assistance. You're not going to, you have to be smart about it, as well as prepared to do counterintuitive things at times. And so and thinking about this and about the number of unemployed that it actually represents, I mean, between, you don't know, depending on the structural change, whether you're going to have 20 or 50% of the population without employment, and certainly not make the jobs that they were doing before. And we all know that unemployment benefits and cash are essential for the situation we're in right now, but we also know that, you know, it will not go on forever. And so with that context of a fairly profound social and economic change in front of us, regardless of whether we open up now or not, I'm going to ask John, I think, first to comment, because I know he was very active along with James and some other people in launching a recovery program for the kind of pandemic in the pandemic that we had before, the opioid pandemic in West Virginia, and ways to get folks that are in trouble and need help and are on the road to trying to find a solution involved in the solution. And I thought that was an important effort, and given what's happening now, something like that maybe needs to happen even bigger. We have a bigger pandemic. So John Unger, welcome to the program. I've always enjoyed talking to you, and whether we're debating or discussing religion or politics or whatever, but welcome to the program. I hope you are well and staying safe, and let us know your thoughts.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on your show and being your guest. I always enjoy the opportunity. So we're looking. You have to look at recovery in two different aspects. Either the micro or macro, or I call the individual, and then the community. Many times we talk about recovery being the individual. How do we get that person help? From a setback, some type of trauma, how do you get treatment, and then from treatment you go through the various stages of change, and I call those the T's. You got the trauma, that's the initial blow, and then you have triage, where you try to look at the resources you got, gather it, stabilize. Then you have treatment, then you have transition, you're transitioning, and then transformation. So we talk a lot about that in the area of recovery, and it could be anything from any type of trauma, setback, be it drug addiction, alcohol. It could also be some type of depression, mental health, adverse childhood experience, PTSD. All these types of things play into it. So when we talk about recovery, as far as my approach to it is broader than just substance use disorder. We all have addictions of some sort. That's our nature. It's called the science of desire. That's what drives us. That's what makes us thrive. Those types of the adrenaline that we have in us. So we all have addictions of some sort. And we also all are in recovery at some stage in our life. It's just a matter of, do we have the resiliency to be able to get through it? And those are the resiliency skills. The part that we don't do a lot of talk about is recovery and community. And this is the part that I think that is lacking. And I always like to use the analogy that James Boyd brought to my attention of the tree, and he's probably talked about it quite a bit on this show in the past. But the idea of a tree that's dying, very unhealthy, you take it and you replant it, you bring it back to health, but then you put that tree back into the soil that it was once in. It starts to once again diminish and die. And the same thing, that's our community, the environment. And so we have to look at we have to look at stages. So we've all had trauma, every one of us. This situation does not distinguish between any type of race, socio-economic class, doesn't distinguish between the old or the young, any age group. It's hit us all in some aspects. Now, economically, it's hit some more than others. Of course, those that struggle, the working class, the working families that struggle every day because of the fact that this has been a disruption, and it's going to take a long time for recovery in the economic sense for them. But as far as trauma, we all have been traumatized by this. So we got to recognize the fact that we're not going to be going back to the old ways. Once we get back, I hear people say, once we get back and we get back into things and everything, it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same. It's called a new norm, or what's the next normal. And we got to be looking at that. And we got to be looking at, okay, we have to triage and do treatment as we're going through this. Then there's going to be a transition period. I think people are trying to transition now. Unfortunately, I think we may get another bump. You're going to see an increase of COVID-19, according to the experts. So it's going to be a while until we do the transition. And then transformation. I guess the one thing that I've been trying to figure out for me during this time is, what am I going to be like and who am I going to be on the other side? Because it's going to be a different John Unger. It'll be a different John Case or JB or any of us. So what is that going to be? Who is that going to be? And I think this is the time that we can set a reset button. We can keep the things we like in our lives, and then discard some of the things we don't, because we don't have to go back to what we used to do unless we want to try to do some aspects of it, but it's going to be different. And so that's the part that gives me hope, that, and if you look at society and civilization, they talk about the influenza of 1918. We've gone through similar types of situations, not in the modern age, but definitely society, civilization. You talk about the Ice Age. I mean, all these types of things in history, when it looked pretty bleak, I can't imagine, what it was like for a German Jew, a Jewish population in Germany during Nazi Germany, what it could look like it was never going to change. But there was transformation that occurred there. I study on Tuesdays and Saturdays Torah with the Jewish synagogues, and one of the things was talking about the fact that there's life and there's hope. We talked a lot about that from the Torah, and the fact of the matter is that although the Jewish people have gone through various historical ups and downs, struggles that are just enormous, they've always persevered. They've always come through, and the same thing with civilization of all of us as humans. So we're going to get through this. It's just a matter of, the question is, what do we want to be when we go through this transition into transformation? What do we want to transform into? And that's the part that if we focus on that, saying that we're going to come out of this, what do we want to be? What a better, greater. I remember in 2016 when I went down the floods in southern West Virginia, and I worked with the community setting up this what was called Greater Long-Term Recovery Committees, and Greater Greenbrier was the first one that formed, and they wanted to be called Greater Greenbrier because they didn't want to go back to the old Greenbrier. They wanted to be better than what they were before the floods. So they called themselves Greater Greenbrier Long-Term Recovery Committee. It's still going on today. Matter of fact, they transitioned from flood into the opioid epidemic and now into this pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. And it's that whole idea of the community coming together, collaborating, coordinating, cooperating, and communicating and connecting with each other that's actually pulled themselves out. And they're very active right now down in that community, that resiliency there. You know, we need to really kind of develop that in our own communities and look at ways in which we can work together to get through this. Because at the end, you know, what is it that Nietzsche says? What doesn't kill us only makes us stronger. This is going to
That's not Arnold.
What's that?
That's not Arnold. Remember Arnold Schwarzenegger put that on one of his movies.
Whatever does not kill us makes us stronger.
Yeah, I think he stole it from Nietzsche. But anyhow, that's where we are. That's where we are. So
this type of thing.
Let me put it to our panel here this morning. Is that that's an interesting concept? Who are we going to be coming out of this? And other folks want to respond to that? That's an interesting.
I'd like to be a cartoon dragon, please.
Okay.
No,
you could be any avatar you want now. I mean,
yeah, there you go. With the avatar Facebook thing, I just did poorly on my Facebook page. John, I want to say something.
Go ahead, Mike.
That's a little bit irritating, but fascinating at the same time. Your microphone disappears and reappears.
That's the stupid. That's because I'm in San Francisco
because of that backdrop.
My background with the bridge there. But I know
I just want to honestly. I just want my wife and I to get to a point where we feel stable. That's all. I don't want much. I just want to have an opportunity to spend some time with my friends. Make sure they're all taken care of. Make sure my extended family is taken care of. I'd like to go see my mom down in Culpeper and visit with her, but I can't really take that risk right now. And I'd like to see my brothers and their kids. I missed my nephew's birthday, which was the other day. He's 15 years old, and he has a mustache and an attitude to go along with it. The only thing I missed about his birthday is me being able to slap him upside the head. Because I know we would wrestle a little bit, but that's the kind of thing that I think people and families that's the kind of structure that's not there right now. That's fun and exchange with your family and on and on and on. I look forward to those little things. I don't know about you guys.
Those are some of the things that are not going to be the same. John's point is well taken. Nothing is going to be the same for a very long time. And I also like that these things have these problems are all going to have foundations. Like the addiction problems is a perfect example. We can't run away from this. We can't put this in jail and forget about it. We can't do that. We can't ignore where this addiction comes from. All of those things are in full view for the world. Whether we do anything about it or not is what remains to be seen. But the addiction for me, I start with how you get along with your parents. Tell me about your childhood, and they're pretty similar. Unfortunately, and then a lot of our solutions, from my perspective, from my profession, don't work. They come back. they come back to jail. Recidivism is ridiculous. It's ridiculous, and it's in your face. Every time I turn on my computer at work, it's in my face. There they are, where they are in a jail. But the column most interesting in this respect is how many times they've been booked here. And if you see under 5 per page with 60 names, that's doing good. 17, 20, 12, 8, it's all like that down the line, down the column. Hardly any first timers, and this is a jail, not a prison. And I don't know about discouraging. There's a lot of people doing things. Kevin Knowles is doing a lot, but a lot of the addicts hate his guts. Because he's an asshole, but he's trying to help these guys. I hook them up and they hang the phone up and say, that guy's a jerk. I said, yeah, but he'll in this mountaineer recovery place they just opened, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful. I'm sure it does really good things. You have to talk them into it almost. And these are people wanting help.
Right.
And I see that bleeding over into every aspect. And John Case, you said something about the markets won't fix this. Well, markets never did do, in my opinion, well by everyone. There's always a loser. There's always a loser in the market economy.
Well, that's true, but there's also, I mean, you got $20 trillion worth of transactions that take place every year, and there's no way that experiments having a command economy where some administratively someone tries to figure all that out. That doesn't work. But on the other hand, you do have these failures in market economies that then have to be the markets themselves have to be restructured, or they get restructured. I mean, the post-World War II economy was quite different, than the depression that preceded it. Okay. But mainly because there was there are a lot of reasons, but one of them was that the federal government got about 4 times bigger and was employing a lot of people either through defense or on other kinds of activities. And it created a big stabilizer, right? And out of that, firms, had when the era of growth, came up, firms had the confidence to, to redo things. But I mean, it's like let's take the vaccine technology, and the way that Larry Summers talked about this was very interesting. Do you want an effective vaccine? Well, there's 2 ways to get it. One, you can offer a giant prize. And, we have a country of people who like to play the lottery, okay? And if it's a big enough prize, fine, they'll go after it. But the minute they win the prize of inventing the vaccine, and then they say, oh, well, you're going to have to give it away because, no one's going to put up with you charging 300% profits, et cetera, to, do the thing. Or you can have the government just pay 5 top guys or top firms to do it. And 4, of course, the problem is the ones that know there's only a 20% chance of winning. A lot of people aren't going to get into it because they don't, it's not worth the investment, right? And they're not going to be able to charge for it in the end anyway. So you have this, so you either have to have insurance or a giant prize, but you can't have not both. No insurance and no big prize, right? I mean, history shows that does not work.
Jonas Salk, you can't beat him. When John said everything is going to be different, I'm hoping everything is radically different. I don't expect that, but that would be my hope, that everything would be 1964 different.
Yeah.
Which isn't different, really, yet either. So we have so many areas and so many places, and so many avenues that we could do better, and I'm not really sure what this is going to be, but I'm hoping it's very different.
So James, let's have James weigh in here from he just relocated to New Jersey, and I'm interested in his reaction too. Here.
Well, first of all, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. Thanks for having me here. I listened to the comments, and they're spot on. So what I would like to be on the other side of this in response to the question is I want to be a better recovery coach professional. And what I'm seeing during the pandemic is that addiction is a disease of isolation. And so pandemic puts recovery at a severe risk. And for us as recovery coach professionals, for myself, I'm having to learn how to put that idea to rest that we're going to fail in recovery because we're not physically connecting with one another. And so social media, is playing a big part in that. I appreciate everything that's going on. For me as a recovery coach professional, moving from West Virginia to New Jersey, what I see is that we're being put into a place in recovery as West Virginians as a broadband response, because I'm still working for a doctor in West Virginia. I'm still a recovery coach professional, and from the Recovery Coaches Academy under the leadership of Senator Pastor John Unger and Marty Steiner and the whole crew. But I'm here in New Jersey connecting to people who are still struggling with addiction in West Virginia. So when I first started advocacy in the recovery coaching arena, it was just so many barriers. And I feel that the barriers are being torn down because of the efforts of all of us, all of you all of the listening audience. And if we are to become a recovery-ready community, we have to look at how do you establish yourself as a recovery coach professional, treating a disease that is a disease of isolation. Now, how do we go around that? And I believe that we're figuring it out by virtue of just having this conversation on Zoom. So that's just my thoughts. I want to be a better recovery coach professional on the other end of this. And I see myself heading in that direction.
JB.
Yeah, I agree with James that that everybody's weighing in on this means a lot as far as our personal experience. And Senator Unger has always been a beacon of light in a storm. So it's great to see him on here and get his views. Myself, I'm kind of isolated most of the time anyway. This wasn't a big transition for me to be away from people a lot. It's very hard for me, like Mike said, to be away from family. I want to see my granddaughter, but I got a kitten, right? I got a kitten, so that's good. I'm gonna have my hands full for a while now, with that kitten.
Want 6 more? Because I've got them.
I know. This is the time of year for them. Yeah,
they're under my shed.
These are pretty domesticated already. That they're into everything. They're fun to watch, and it keeps your mind active and loving and nurturing and all that kind of stuff. And that's what we need. And we're not getting it from our leadership necessarily. The top level. We see a president that's just completely.
That's an awful comment. That comment is awful. It's an awful comment.
You're fired.
He's established a new norm for presidential behavior, and it's very low. it's below low. I mean, it's just it's bizarre.
Not going to get any
Never
argument
mind an
about that.
alternative candidate. How about somebody that can speak in complete sentences?
But I think for me, the transition is going to be more into the agricultural realm. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to get more into agriculture. I want to grow food and looking into helping some local farmers form a co-op for hemp. And I mean, hemp is just really incredible. And we could have done this a long time ago. This is something that just came along in recent history here in West Virginia, but it's something that should have been done, 10 years ago. We'd be much better off. But, you see the coal industry crumbling and, they want to blame it on this and blame it on that. But we all know that coal was going down to, despite anything on the outside. So that's my thing. I think I'm going to get more into the agricultural aspects of society and make sure we can feed everybody for the next pandemic. I feel like this is going to be something that's going to happen more and more based on, climate crisis. I'm a big environmentalist, and I do believe that the climate crisis has a lot to do with what we're into right now. And so I'm going to try to remain optimistic and listen to the rest of you. But I appreciate the opportunity to be on.
You're going to be a pandemic professional, like that's the point.
I think we all are going to be.
We're going to have to be, John.
Pandemic professionals, because we're going to have to.
We're all going to have to be. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, JB, I totally get it, man, because I think JB's kind of leading the way a bit here as far as influencing me in terms of looking at how to grow your own food. Because this is you're going to have problems with the food distribution nationally. You're looking at some problems. You're looking at numbers being depleted because all the meat manufacturing plants are just overwhelmed with COVID, man. Kidding.
Well, let me ask another question here because more pointed. I meant to ask it, but I don't see how to make it. People need money. If you don't have any cash, you're gonna head outside your home, and you're not gonna sit there and die in your bed. Okay, people will, do whatever they have to do, and I see. Even assuming that there's an opening up, right? Just take the restaurants, for example. They're going to have half the customers. They can only seat half the customers. I don't see how people actually eat with a mask on. I'm still, maybe that's a technological issue that someone will fix soon. But my point is that retail, same thing, all right? And I saw the jam up. I went to Home Depot yesterday to get mulched, because we're not growing food, we're growing flowers here. By the way, John, if you need any flowers for churches, weddings, burials, we have 10,000.
Go get the flowers.
Yard, because of the former head of the Harpers Ferry flower gardening club that lived here, right? And she was magnificent at doing it. But my big question is, we need money and we're going to need jobs, okay, that the regular market is not going to provide. And as long as the current president is in effect, there will be no help coming over the hill that is going to be of much interest to Jefferson County. There might be there's going to be aid to corporations to keep them in business. But I don't know. If you send $1 billion to an airline to pay their employees, but those employees are never coming back, or half of them aren't, isn't it just better to give the money to the employees directly rather than, keeping alive an enterprise that may or may not, half of it will never come back. So my concern is public works and money. We have extended unemployment, but how long can it go? And two, if the private economy does not come back sufficiently, you're sitting there at 20% unemployment. Going back to 10 is still a social crisis. Okay, even if that happens. And so that we're talking about an intervention that needs to take place in the state or nationally, and in our communities. I see Shepherdstown Shares is going great guns trying to put together, some of the programs they had started during the last recession, actually. But I'm wondering, how do we mobilize, or how do we participate to get the money, and if necessary, to get the public works to put people to work in a constructive way? Anybody want to speak? John?
Yeah, I like to try. So it's called agility and adaptability. As far as the market's concerned, that's gonna be different. There'll be different needs and different desires. So what somebody did before the pandemic may be different of what they do after. I mean, you think about this, the shift that occurred from horse to buggy when the automobile was invented. I was watching a Ken Burns documentary about the automobile and the original, and how it just, so many horses and buggies, and then when the automobile came, that even governments banned it from driving on streets, and then they would have to send a week's notice if they were going to drive downtown because they scared the horses. And today, you would have to give a week's notice if you're going to bring a horse and buggy downtown, instead of a car. How this has changed, and you look at, how we've adapted as things shifted. I mean, I don't know if you all remember, but Blockbuster, you go and you rented a VCR tape down there. I mean, they no longer exist, because you can get it online, videos. I mean, people are streaming all the time. Think about this, John. I mean, you think, I used to go there in person in that little studio, and have your show. But look at this, I can sit in my home and have the show right there with you. And we have James Boyd in New Jersey, and we all can come together and see each other. This wasn't even thought of, I don't think, several years ago. So we have to adapt. And JB hit on some things about the growing our food. I think that's going to be a shift. And he inspired me too, of as far as self-sufficiency. I mean, if you look at his place, with solar and all like that, of someone who doesn't depend on being on the grid, he's preached it, he's talked about it to me, and actually it really kind of took this pandemic for me to really discover it, because I got to tell you, I now have a garden. I had it in the past, but I never had time. Planted a garden. I even have chickens. Can you believe that? Chickens. I'm a beekeeper, Farmer John. So add that to that. And a lot of JB, the idea of this, and it goes back to what Mike and also James and Larry were talking about, relationships. It's only been 2 months, maybe a little bit more. How often did we go without contacting our relatives, when we're so busy, and, I forgot to call, my mother, or I forgot to call my niece, whatever. I mean, some of us may be pretty conscious about that, and that's really good, but I know I hadn't been. But I got to tell you something. This time has really readjusted me on my relationship aspect. And James talks about, the addiction is the disease of isolation. And I just think that now, maybe for the first time, we all are in the same boat. I mean, those folks that have struggled with addiction, of that isolation, that disease of isolation, they themselves are now experiencing it that they didn't have before. And so now there's a certain human understanding of those that maybe have gone through it. So as we evolve into the next norm, whatever that is, that transformation, I just think that health is going to become more important to us. I think what you're going to see is a debate over public health and health more than ever before. Because now it's first and foremost in our minds. And let's face it, folks. I mean, we can get a vaccine for COVID-19 But JB's right. What about COVID-22? COVID-30? You know what I'm saying? I mean, this thing could evolve in something else. So if all we're chasing is vaccines, then I think we haven't learned anything. You know.
That's an interesting point.
Well, that's great. One thing, Senator, is first and foremost, my wife, patient. Oh, I'm sorry, James speaking.
No. Go ahead.
He's got his.
John, Senator John Unger, my wife, Patience Wade, says hello. So that's first and foremost. She wanted to.
Tell her hello.
She may even pop her head in here soon. That's number one. Number two, I think JB and you are really onto something, and I think this is what you learn to appreciate a little bit more of what a kind of a visionary that the prior administration was to a certain extent in terms of putting together an international program to recognize these pandemics, to have boots on the ground, to have people in the administration that are wise and a little bit more knowing than the actual people that do this kind of thing for a living. The reality is a lot of those folks were fired. They were let go. And I think that really hurt and slowed the reaction time of the current administration, no matter what they said. That the reality is a lot of people wound up getting a lot more sick because there was no expediency and there was, forgive my expression, a whole lot of bullshit coming from the top.
Okay, it's allowed on this show as well. Yeah. Well, I'm still. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm just planning on trying to survive it, John. Okay, that's my immediate plan. And our family is, we have people in every situation. Okay, some who've suffered over it, and some who we had one person that's on their 400th call to the local unemployment office to try to get their benefits. Okay. And I worry a lot about how can our community, I think the churches can play an important role, even though attendance at churches is now also a critical kind of problem. I'm a different kind of, but it was a problem before. I remember the mayor of Shepherdstown there, Jim Augers, telling me that many services in the town depended upon volunteers, and volunteers depended upon the ability of the churches primarily to supply them. And when attendance in churches went down, the availability of volunteers also went down, and therefore the quality of certain services were being the parks, a number of other things that were being supplied by volunteers. Okay. Alternatively, you have to have a big tax increase to pay people salaries to do those things. And so it's how can we reach? Is there a ways to improve our reach so that those who are isolated, who are facing great frustrations about their economic future, okay, how can we get in touch with them? And it's kind of like contact tracing, right? I mean, in the pandemic, like economic depression tracing, okay? Because otherwise these forces will, where can they move to? If they move to Maine, they have to wait 2 weeks in quarantine before they can go talk to anybody. I mean, they can't even pick it up and move to California that easily. And it's not like the Great Depression or the Dust Bowl or not quite the same there either. But our need for community will be even greater in those circumstances, it seems to me. How can we do that?
Well, you're exactly right. And there are going to be a lot of challenges. About the churches, we still have virtual worship. And I got to tell you, the attendance is better than it was when we had it in person. There's about 150 to 170 folks that join on by WebEx. We see each other like this, and it's a little chaotic if we don't have everyone muted, as it is on this show. but they unmute and they're learning how to utilize the technology. If they call in, if they don't have, the capability of a face-to-face, but we are continuing to connect, and I think that there's a real desire for connection at this point, that maybe we may see a resurgence in volunteerism and community. I know one thing that's helped me as far as appreciating folks. Every time I go to the grocery store, it used to be just an afterthought to pick up something. Now it's a planned operation. Go in with gloves, the mask, but I got to tell you, each and every time I thank the stocking clerks for their service. I make it a point to thank the cashiers for their service. All those folks that maybe I overlooked and didn't bother stopping and thanking, I make it a great point to thank them for their service. Even though they're doing a job and they're getting paid, they're out there doing a service for us. And I'm hoping others do the same, because the idea of wearing a mask for me is really out of courtesy for you. I know that mask, that little thing, is not going to protect the virus from getting in my face. I mean, I'm realistic of that. What I'm doing it is, if I'm trying to show appreciation to others, saying, look, I appreciate you. I'm wearing this in solidarity with you. I'm wearing this in solidarity with our healthcare professionals that are on the front line. I'm wearing this solidarity for our EMS, our emergency responders on the front line, the clerks that are out there, the people that are picking up our trash, the garbage trucks, and all those folks. I'm wearing this to really support them. And to me, it's a small sacrifice that I can do to show my appreciation for those that are out there every day keeping our society going. And I think that in the end, John, I know it looks clean, and I know, just trying to survive, and that's first and foremost. But I gotta say, I have a lot of hope, because even though we have instability at the federal level and in the government aspects and politics, in the communities, I see something different. Something that inspires me, that human spirits coming through of kindness and compassion, people checking on each other, delivering groceries to senior citizens, getting their medicine. I mean, making masks. I mean, I know companies that are coming up, buy one, give one mask, so they're trying to do all these things. I mean, that to me is that human spirit that gives me a lot of hope.
All right. Anybody else?
We speaking of that, we made with our neighbor Fran over 350 masks. So we felt and just gave them away. And one of the things that we try to do is in the community, we'll go out, like, for example, Food Lion, I know now, has a box of masks that are unused. If you go in, they prefer that you wear the mask, but the odd thing is some of their employees aren't wearing masks. So that's kind of a little bit troublesome, but my wife has decided she's not going to go back to Food Lion. So
really?
Yeah, she's
I was there yesterday, and they were all wearing masks yesterday.
Okay, well, Martin's, I know, is required. It's part of their job description now, and they have the big plexiglass things and barriers in between the cashiers now. And hell, Walmart had all masks. But you still have people coming in and arguing about masks. I mean, good gracious, there's a guy in Indiana at a 7-Eleven that suggested that his customer wear a mask. The guy beat him up and poured hot coffee on him. I mean, come on. It's just a mask. I mean, you only have to wear it when you're interacting, and it's as the senator said, it's more for other people's benefit. You're not breathing on them, so you minimize whatever effect that if you're a carrier, and God knows, I think a lot of people don't even know if they're carriers yet.
Right.
Let me one question, John. The testing the levels of testing and tracing, you're probably more knowledgeable about this. I know you've been posting, useful information about this on Facebook. Where are we at as far as where we need to be in the testing and tracing capabilities here and execution here in West Virginia, and especially in our area?
Well, we're nowhere where we're supposed to be or should be as far as we open up. And that's one of the things I kept pressing to try to get the number of tests that are being conducted. They didn't want to give me that information. I finally got it because it showed that they weren't doing adequate testing. If you look around our surrounding area, the numbers continue to climb as far as positives of COVID-19 and deaths. And then you look at Jefferson and Berkeley, it's very low. And there's only two explanations for it. One is what I hope is, from my pastor's point of view, my priest's point of view, is that we have divine intervention, because that would be a great sermon on Sunday. I would love to preach that West Virginia has been favored by God, that we are blessed, that we have been protected, that we have gone through, the Red Sea parted, and we have been liberated through all the COVID-19. Trust me, that part as a pastor, I want. But the other part of me, the critic, this, critical thinker, is I want data to prove it so that I can definitely say it's a miracle, and that's where I can't get the data. But when I did get it, it showed that we're not doing the testing. Listen, the testing is not going to give you the idea that you're immune to it. What it does is it gives you an idea of being able to monitor your risk. When you look at numbers like you only have 90 from Jefferson County COVID-19 positives, but you look across the border and they got 2,000. 90, you're like, one death, 90. I can risk that. That's okay. But then right across the board is 2,000 with 90 deaths. Maybe I'm not going to risk it as much. Maybe I ought to wear that mask. Maybe I ought to protect myself a little more. It gives people information that they need to make informed decisions for themselves and their families and their communities to protect them. If you're not doing adequate testing, you're not giving people information to calculate that risk and make informed decisions. The other thing is PPEs, personal protective equipment. We're asking people to open up, but there's no personal protective equipment, no sanitizers, nothing out there that they can get, And so they're going out there telling you're saying you need to follow these protocols, but there's none of that available. And so, part of that, our state government ought to provide information, data through testing and personal protective equipment, so that businesses and other things can go up and provide the protection. Because they spent 2 months, that's why we went in, is to give government time to catch up, right? Catch up on all these things. Well, then they say, okay, it's time to come out, but we're not ready yet. That's like basically climbing everybody on a bus and saying, you know what, we haven't installed the brakes yet. We'll put the headlights on eventually, but let's all roll on down the road. To me, that's irresponsible if you don't have those things in place as you're moving forward, Or if you want to be a coach, it's like sending the kids out to the field without shoulder pads and helmets. We'll get those for you eventually, but you go out there and play and just try not to get a concussion,
Right.
So that's what aggravates me about our government.
You're on a side of an argument. You got to keep that in mind. There's a counter to that, and it's in the streets with rifles. These morons that run around threatening to kill people if they can't wear their mask or they can't get a haircut. It's stuff like that. But I'll give you, I think I have an example because of the jail, because of my work at the jail. And there's an influx and outflux of people from the community in and out of jail all the time. they come and go, and then they get transferred downstate. I got federal inmates from all over the country we don't know anything about, because the U.S. Marshal Service takes care of that. My personal experience, though, with this COVID, when I took that job 9 years ago, it was non-essential, and so I wouldn't have a problem I have now. That is they converge with the DOC, Department of Corrections. Now the jails and the prisons the regional jails and prisons are all intermeshed. When they did that recently, and this COVID happened, I became essential as a counselor. Now I'm 69 years old. I got ready. I took all my leave, all my sick leave, all my annual leave that I could take. And when that was starting to run out, I was thinking about going back to work. My family gave me an intervention. Yeah. You are not risking our mother's health by going into a jail until you get off. And so now I'm faced with almost a forced retirement from a job I love. I really love the job. But I have to say to myself, is that smart? Without, like John just said, I don't have the information. I don't have the information to make a solid decision, because I call the nurses, they say, you're doing testing in there. Yeah. Then they describe how they're doing it. It's not adequate. They're testing people with symptoms. And I can't risk my life on that unnecessarily, you know. And so I'm really in a tight spot, because I don't want to retire. I like the job, you know. And then John was saying, also, what are we going to do later? Everything's going to be so different. JB's talking about food and how it relates to climate change. We can't ignore climate change because we've got a pandemic, because they're related. Big ag, you know, and pollution, all these things. The blanket has just been whipped off the bed, and there we are. We eat too much meat. We're too close to animals. We do all of these. We've always done all of these things wrong, but the people who suffered the consequences didn't have any power. So we just keep rolling right along, you know. Well, now here we are. Here we are facing the music. Divine intervention. I don't see how we can exactly wait for that. You know. I think more than anything, one major factor in anything like this and in life in general comes from the Course in Miracles. Is that the main premise, main thing is learning how to forgive ourselves and everybody else. You know.
I heard that, pal.
Yeah, one of the things I wanted to point out, since Larry, you know, I'm so sorry. I know how much your job means to you, man, and that really this predicament just sucks. But with regards to prison, Ohio had announced about a month ago. JB, I don't know if you saw this. I think I even talked to you about it. Ohio announced that they're going to test every prison and every prisoner, right? So they get to these explosive numbers at the end of testing 2 prisons, and they're like, no, we're just kidding. We're just going to test the ones that show symptoms, and that's it. And they just cut it off because the numbers are just atrocious. I mean, that's where you're having your explosion of activity, is in these prisons and close working environments like meat packing facilities, manufacturers, and on and on and on, man. I mean, you look at the state of Arizona. Arizona doesn't want you to know. Arizona will not release their numbers, right. And people are dying. And the Arizona get what they hate to don't tell anyone, and they won't even release the numbers for the elderly home, for the assisted living facilities.
There's so many aspects. Just within the institution, and I have my institution that I'm familiar with, but there are so many people, sitting in jail because our bail system is wrong. It's just wrong. You know, if you have the money, you go and wait for your trial and you go to your court date. You don't have any money to sit in jail, sometimes for months. That's a good portion of that crowded population. They should just let them out. Just let them out, you know, so that we can deal with this more easily. And I think they are. I think the population is way down from when 2.5 months ago.
Let me return it. We got a few more minutes, just a few more minutes. So I want to return the conversation a little bit to politics, because while I agree that we're going to be, there's probably not any knights coming over the hill.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Rescue us all that much, you know. But
I'm glad you mentioned that.
And we're going to have our, I think our reliance upon community will have to grow. Nonetheless, we have the outcomes for both our community and our country are going to be very tremendously based on its leadership. You have sound leadership that's relying upon science and at least, and some sense of decency. Well, okay, you know, we'll do the best we can, and the optimistic. There will be an end, and there will be a better end. But it's also, you know, it's like John Maynard Keynes said when he was arguing with people in the 20s about whether or not, you know, you should have, and then later in the 30s, whether you should have this big intervention into this marvelous system that was producing all this wealth. And he says it would fix itself eventually. And he says that's true. It will fix itself eventually. But by that time, there could be several world wars and certainly a lot of death in between. And so, you know, how bad it's going to be depends on politics. And so question is that we now have the question of whether people can get to the polls, or by mail, can the polls get to them effectively enough so that the people's will can be reflected in the November elections. And I'd like to hear John and others comment on that as we move forward.
Well, I'm going to vote absentee. Probably hadn't done that. I haven't done absentee balloting since I was overseas as a student. I think but I'm going to do it this time for the primary. And I know I called in and ordered it. They said that just an overwhelming request for people wanting to do that, which is a challenge for them because they're trying to get organized, but it shows also an intense interest, I think, in people to actually go and vote. That maybe there's a resurgency of that they're wanting to vote, but even though they may feel that they're not going to be safe necessarily, because they don't know what June brings around. I mean, we're still, you know, weeks away. So I think that in how they vote, it'll be interesting because, you know, we're going to be a reflection to what we want. And I think you're going to see a shift. I don't know if as far as parties or whatever, but you're going to see a major shift. I mean, you think about it's already been shifted. Up to this point, all I heard in the political structure was a pseudo-science. What's these scientists know anyhow? You know, don't need no education. Don't need no education. Another brick in the wall. I think, Mike, that's your time. But that's what the world was. You know, climate change, you know, that's a hoax. Science is a hoax. Well, the same people are now saying we got to listen to our scientific experts. You know, someone's changed the tune somewhere, which, you know, maybe this has been a wake-up call, you know, for that. I don't know. But there's been a shift occurring that I see out there, and I think it's just going to materialize, and hopefully it'll be for the better, you know.
Other people want to weigh in on this on their how you planning on voting, JB? I mean, by mail or by in person?
Oh yeah, I've already voted. We learned early on that the absentee ballot was going to be fundamentally Is that you, James?
Here, let me. There, I got him. Yeah, he's okay now. Yeah, right. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, we knew that the absentee ballot would help us have an election where we weren't subjecting ourselves to the virus, standing in line and close quarters on election day. So I think groups like the Citizens Action and the ACLU and the unions, AFL-CIO, they all realized early on that, you know, we had to have a way to vote safely. And that's what this absentee thing is all about. My question all along has been, what are the logistics of that when you look to your local county clerk? How are they going to process all that? Do they have enough people to count the votes? How are they going to count the votes? I mean, you know, there's some unanswered questions, but people want to know that their vote counts. And, you know, these absentee ballots will be the majority of those ballots of the votes cast in the election. What is the process by which we can be assured that these votes will be counted properly and honestly and tallied and everybody's vote counts? That's the part that's kind of, to me, it's a little bit of a mystery. I don't know about the rest of you.
This is what I'm saying. Here's what I tried to tell Mitch McConnell. That the money for our elections is in the current bill. If the moron would read it, he would understand. But he's for the 1.1% or whatever. Voting by mail is going to be crucial. Crucial.
Thank you, Bernie.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? James.
Yes, this has been really, really great. You know, I think that the soil is being changed, you know, as we speak. We're cultivating the soil. I was thinking a minute ago about cultivating the ground. And so when you get to this big old rock, you got to get everybody involved and get that boulder out of the ground so that you can cultivate the ground and make it fertile. And I think that the way we can get people's attention, because one of the things that I find that people don't like to do is to pay, and it don't cost you anything to pay attention. It doesn't cost anything to pay attention. So, you know, I want to be like Toto. I want to be like in the Wizard of Oz, because Toto, he was focused, and Toto's job was to protect the crew, Dorothy and that whole crew. And so he was pulling back the shade on the darkness around that whole situation. And I think that's what's going on in the country. The shades are being pulled back in a lot of instances. And, you know, people who are in power don't really want to hear the truth. And so I believe that what we have to do is continue to arm ourselves with the truth and move forward, because people said a long time ago that people couldn't recover from drug addiction and substance abuse. And, you know, we need data. Well, what kind of data do you need? Somebody that's been in recovery successfully for how many years? How long does it take? And so when someone comes along with the truth and frames it like the Wizard of Oz, something simple, people will certainly start to reject that. And so in the Blue Ridge Resource Center, we've gathered so many resources to put on display for people who really don't even know how to ask for resources. They don't know where to look. And so one of the things at the Resource Center is that we uncover these resources for people and have them tailor-made to whatever it is that the person, the individual, might be looking to have. And I think that, by the way, my vote has already been cast. And I think for the country is that we're moving towards looking at becoming recovery ready. but by virtue of the mistakes that we've made in the past, but we're becoming recovery ready because we know what we have to do. We got to get that big boulder out of the ground and toss it aside. So that's all I got on that.
Okay, well, I think we're at our hour point here, and if we stay at the hour point, then YouTube doesn't do its advanced auto grader on us here.
I just want to say that I took that recovery coach training with John and Marty a year and a half ago. It was a week long, and it was really good. It brings things down to the individual, which is a really, really good thing. Plus,
okay, we got to bring it to an end. We got to bring it to an end, everybody. All right, thank you, Senator Unger. Thank you, James.
On the end of the road.
You want to say something, Mike?
I just wanted to say I thank you all. Thank you, Reverend Senator John Unger, Larry Bish, James Boyd, David Christensen, and of course your host and justice philosopher, Mr. John Case. I'm Mike. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Okay, thank you, John. Okay, we'll see you later.